Before telling me the episode of the dentist, can you tell me how come that there was a dentist in Bergen-Belsen?
That's what I was going to tell you. You see, the SS needed a dentist. And as we were the first people in Belsen, they found this dentist and they installed a very small dentist surgery for the SS. And they allowed us sometime to use the dentist, but they were not allowed to use their material. I was just going to tell you about my teeth. He filled up 3 holes, 2 with white cement, because it was not, he had no other thing. But when he came to my front teeth, he requested the nurse to prepare the ceramic to fill up my front teeth, because he said to me, "You're a too pretty girl that I put white cement in your teeth." I'm 85 now, and it's only about a year ago that the front tooth cracked. So all this year, his filling was stayed in place.
What did he tell you?
What
happened to him?
Well, he told me after he was finished that day, he said to me that he was very tired. He felt very tired. And when I looked at him, I could see he was not well. So I told him to have rest. He said, "Yes, I will go to bed straight after I'm finished with you." He said, "I've been waiting for you to come and then I can rest." And unfortunately, the next day, we were told that he had died in his sleep. Yeah, I felt very sad about that.
Wasn't that a kind of predestination?
I think he knew I was his last patient, yes. That's why he told the nurse to use the ceramic of the SS. The nurse refused and said, no, you can't do that. He said, "Hurry up," he said, before the rest of the filling set. And of course he was her boss and she did it. Yes, it was beautifully done. It looked like white pearls when he was finished with me. And he told me to take care of my teeth while we're in the camp. And until we get home, he said, then have the cement taken out and replaced. Yeah.
It's incredible that in your book there are many episodes of love, like this dentist towards you. So there was a tragedy going on, but at the same time, little love actions
happened. You see, when you look back over the years and then you realize while I wrote this book that one thing had to happen before the next thing could happen. And that's what I discovered when I wrote the book. That, for instance, when my mother sold her diamond ring for a few gem jars of sugar, and it was the sugar, a cup of sugar, which saved my life. And I was allowed to come in the children's house.
How did the group of children of Belsen form? Could you tell us about the night of St. Nicholas when the SS left you in this cold garage?
Yes, the children were crying, and it was desperation. Not only that we had been from 11 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock standing outside in the open, and 5th of December is very cold. And when they dumped us into the garage, they nobody came to see us for about 3 hours. And then one of the boys said, let's scream together. And so on the count of 3, we all together screamed. We screamed so loud until we lost our voice and we couldn't say, but nobody came. We were so desolated, and we were like there was nobody there to care for us. But of course the little ones, they were crying, and in the end they fell asleep from exhaustion on the concrete floor.
Were there infants too?
Yes, there were 2 babies which I can recall. One was Flipje the Goede, and the other one, I forgot her name after all these years. But she was a little girl. She was actually 1.5 years old, but Flipje was nearly a year, and he unfortunately he died later. I think he had a mid-ear infection, and the SS doctor operated on him, but he died the next day. We don't know, of course, if the SS doctor did a good operation, we don't know that. But he was the first death of the 42 children in the children's house.
Where was the children's house situated in the camp?
Well, first, when we were dropped in the middle of the night, we were just put in a barrack. And after a week or two, the children up till 13, not 14, children up to 13, were moved to another barrack. And that was the children's house, but I was not allowed to go with them. I was too old, I was 14 by then. And like I already said, it was the cup of sugar who saved my life, because the doctor, Dr. Bimko, Hadasha Bimko, and she took me to the commandant, Kramer, who later was hanged. And she asked him, Herr Kommandante, darf ich die Kleine dazu nehmen? Herr Commandant, can I take the little one also in the children's house? And he looked me up and down. He was a horrible man. He had brown piercing eyes and a very fat neck like a bulldog. And he looked me up and down. I must have looked very sad and skinny, because he said yes. But he said, run, and we ran so fast. And that all happened because I gave a cup of sugar and didn't ask anything back for it.
What is the relationship between this cup of sugar and this episode?
The relationship is like I maybe told you already, that my mother sold a diamond ring just before we were separated. And she gave me the sugar pots, 3 of them, gem jars. And she said to me, be careful with that, because you can buy bread for that. And you can buy other things. But she said, give your 2 little brothers and yourself every day a teaspoon of sugar, so you keep your energy up. And I did this, but was very careful with it. But as I told you, that the children up till 13 years old were separated from me, and I had all the sugar in. I visited my brothers in the children's house. And then one day, the lady, Sister Luba, the nurse who saved us, asked me if I know where to get some sugar. And that's when I gave her the cup of sugar, because she wanted to make a birthday cake for Lady Doctor, she told me. And that Lady Doctor took me to the commandant later. So that's the connection.
In your story, it looks like the children were more clever and wiser than adults. They knew they had to stay united. How did they behave and treat each other?
They never were fighting. There were no arguments. They were always good with each other. We knew, excuse me, excuse me, in a camp, you couldn't overlive on your own. You need another person to be your mate, as they say in Australia. You're supporting each other. And children, we were 42 of them, or 41 then, and we knew that we had to stick together in order to stay alive. When there was danger, for instance, if an SS man would enter the corridor of the barrack, we only had to say, shh, and everybody was quiet without making a sound, so we wouldn't draw the attention of the SS man if he entered the barrack. As little as they were, as small as they were, they knew danger. They knew they had to be quiet in order to succeed. There was never any fight, there was never any problem. They were good with each other.
You were a mother to them, but at the same time you found a mother for yourself and for all the children. I'm talking about Sister Luba. Can you tell me something about her?
Well, Sister Luba is the lady who took actually Hadasha Bimko, the doctor, and Sister Luba together managed to find a barrack for the children. And it is Hadashemenko who got the permission from the commandant because she was a doctor. And she worked together with the medical doctor, the SS doctor. And so she got that permission. But Sister Luba is the one who took care of us with some other helpers, Sister Hermina and a few. We called them sisters, not because of a religious matter, but in Dutch, sister means nurse. And so the children call always Sister Luba. Yes, she found us the night when we were dumped, and she took us into the barrack. She was it who provided us with food. And later on, when there was a big evacuation on the 4th of January 1944, and the children were moved from the small, and we all were moved from the small camp we were into the big, what they call the woman camp number 2, which was previously occupied by 3,000 prisoners of war of Russia. Unfortunately, 3,000 of them were shot dead overnight in order to make room for all these people who arrived from Auschwitz. And that's where the children's house was. And last month, if I may tell you, when I visited Velsen, as we call it for short, Bergen-Belsen, I was taken by the historian and the group of Channel 7 to the spot where once the children's house stood, and I was able with 2 other children, as we still call ourselves. One is called the little boy Yiddele, but he's now Julius, and the other was the girl Mala, and the 3 of us stood there bringing respect to the grave which was dug in front of the children's house, the mass grave. And it was an unbelievable feeling to be back there after 70 years, yes.
In your book, you describe the reaction that many people had to the horror they were witnessing and how they called God into question. Where was he? How could he allow all of this? After such a long time, what is your opinion of the Shoah and the mystery of God's silence? You were praying when you were...
Yes, because although I did not come from a religious home, we were very liberal. Of course, my grandfather took me to the synagogue and learned about God, but the question has been asked me before in Berlin, where was God? And I sincerely believe that it was not possible for God to come close because things were so bad and evil that even God couldn't come close, and that is my firm belief. Because God was not in the camp, I don't think so. But still I pray to him.
What was your condition when the Allies arrived, and how many children were saved?
Well, from our children's house, and I'm talking only about the Dutch children, 40 of us got saved. What was my condition? I was just recovering from typhus. And I started to get typhus on the 30th of March. And about 10 days later, if you can overlive the 10 days, then you leave. So I woke up about the 10th of April, and my body had no high fever. And what I felt, I mean, what happened when first of all, on Friday the 13th of April, we had the first inspection from the English, and the English soldier came in, and his name was Dick Williams, and he marched between 2 SS people. We were told by the head of the camp, the head of our camp, the elder they called her, that nobody was allowed outside. Nobody was allowed to make a noise. If we did, we would be shot. So in the enormous quietness of the camp, we heard these heavy footsteps, which the SS always had, and the Grüne Polizei, the sacred police of the SS, always had metal under the boot. So you could hear them coming, and only the sound of it already put the scare into you. But we could hear these heavy boots coming, and I was laying in the window. So we all held our breath, and there they were, two SS men with drawn bayonet, and in between them a short English soldier, which later I found out was 21 years old only, and he looked very proudly with his nose in the air, inspected, but his eyes darted everywhere. And he did see all these dead bodies, of course. And then that was on a Friday, and on Saturday it was totally quiet in the camp, because it was an order from the English that was the condition, because they surrendered Bergen-Belsen to the English without fighting, unconditionally. Sorry, and so the SS had to be, they had to withdraw themselves for 40 kilometers away before the English would enter the camp, and the deadline was 12 o'clock on the 14th of April, Saturday night. And the next day, on Sunday at 3:30, and the camp was deadly quiet. We were waiting for something to happen, because the rumor went around that the SS had put explosives around the camp, and we had no food for 4 days. So they told us that the bread was being poisoned, that they would give that to us. And so the camp was deadly quiet, you couldn't hear a sound, everybody stayed in the barrack. And then at 3:30 in the afternoon there was a wild commotion in the corridor of our barrack. And some Polish woman screamed something hysterically. And then our door of the dormitory burst open, and all the women said, "English there, English there." For 1 minute, everybody froze. And then there was an exodus. The ones who were just better, my brother Max only was up from that very morning, walking with a stick. He was one of the first out of the barrack, and all the children ran, and all the adults ran towards the fence to greet the liberators. And they were running through a field of hundreds and hundreds of dead bodies. And I could see all that through my window. And then I saw Yiddle, who was only 2 years old. He was the last one running through the field. He didn't even know, he knew something was happening. That's why he was running after the bigger ones. And yes, that was the liberation. I would have given anything to be able to run to the fence, but I couldn't get out of my bed. Am I talking too much?
You're not. You're wonderful. My last question is, how come that your soul wasn't poisoned by the evilness of the camp, and that you made this choice for love in your life?
Well, I believe that if there is hatred, you poison yourself. You see what has happened with the hatred in the Holocaust. The people were brainwashed, and the trouble was that everybody was silent. Nobody said, "Hey, you can't do that." But how it come that I'm positive? Well, I'm a positive person. The thing is that I go to the schools to tell the students in Australia, to many schools, and tell as best as I can, and as long as I'm able to, the story of the Holocaust. So I will ask them to tell, like I did today, ask them to tell their children that they met me, and what story I told them, in an effort that it will not happen again. But I believed in the camp when things were so bad that I had terrible cold, I was very hungry, and I saw all these people dying of starvation or typhus. But I always believed that tomorrow would be a better day.
Thank you very much. That was very kind of you. Grazie.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you. Abbiamo siamo in tempo.
Mi prendi le mani, aspetta un attimo, mi prendi le mani.
Again.
Thank
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. And thank you for helping to keep the Holocaust in the mind of the people. Thank you all for doing that. I really mean that.
Very important for us.
Yes, it is
To meet you,
important,
yeah.
because here and there it's sticking its head up again. The anti-Semitism is back on its way up. And I hope it will not happen again. But like I said this morning, these children I had in front of me are the future of Italy. That is true. It's the future of Italy. And if they can tell their children that they have seen me and they heard my story, and if they can repeat it, maybe we can prevent it happening again.
In Italy we have Primo Levi.
Ah, yes, I heard about him. I didn't read his book.
He's an incredible writer.
Yes.
But I must tell you that in his books there is very little trace of hope. And in your book, at the end, you have the impression of a miracle. Everything was so bad, but at the same time, your story is a story of
Survival.
And it was really a miracle. I would tell God was there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, I know we haven't got the time on the television, but in my book, I don't know if it's an Italian book, there is the story that we went looking for Leni's grave, the girl, the pictures in the book, and she died unfortunately 4 days after the liberation. And we went looking for her grave. I think this is in the book. And in 2007, I went back to Belsen because they opened up a beautiful museum. But of course, I have such a photographic memory. The historian in Belsen, who of course was not alive and I experienced it, was a little bit skeptical that I always remembered everything so well, even to the date. So in 2007, when I went back to Belsen, there were 1,400 people in the hall to be present for the opening. And after 3 hours, I was so sick, I went outside. And 10 minutes later, the doors opened of the hall. And at the end of the crowd of people, I saw two Hasidic Jewish men. You know, the one with the black hat and the pipe girls? Well, I had never seen them before in Belsen, so I'm curious. And over the head of the passing crowd, I called, "Hello, where you come from?" And to my surprise, he answered and said, "Brooklyn, New York, lady." I was so shocked that they answered. For the first time in my life, I had no words. And I said, "What are you doing here?" A silly question. But I did ask him, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "My grandfather gave the Hevre Kadisha to the people who died after the liberation." Now that means the final rites. In the final rites, you need 10 men to say the prayers. I was there. I know that didn't happen. And he could see that on my face. And he said, "Not real." He only said the prayers. And as they disappeared in the crowd, I knew without any doubt, my heart was pounding, that the man in the cemetery I describe in my book was their grandfather. And that's how it turned out. The grandfather has kept the book. It's called the Death Book of Bergen-Belsen. You can find it on the internet. Castina Walzer, he kept after the liberation a record of 1,550 people who died there. And I think you should know, if it is in my book, I'm explaining that Leni's grave is in the second row you started. And to make the story short, that book went to Bergen-Belsen and it's now up there to be seen for everybody. And when I heard that, I rang Bergen-Belsen and asked an historian, could he be so kind and look for me in the book and see if Leni's name is in there. And the answer came back the next day via the internet and said, "Leni is buried in section A, row number 2, grave number 3. And there I had the proof that I've been telling the truth.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
That really happened.
Thank you very much.
You're
Grazie.
welcome.
Grazie.
Thank you.